Mercy was never a gift in the Ravencrest Hall. It was a currency, and Celeste had run out of coin the moment the Luna began to bleed. She knelt on black slate beneath the tribunal dais in healer whites, gone stiff with dried crimson, palms open to show she carried no blade, no herb satchel, no defense. Smoke from moon oil braziers curled beneath the carved rafters and caught in her throat, bitter and metallic, while two council sentinels held her shoulders down as though she might lunge for someone. The restraint was theater. Her legs shook so badly she could barely hold herself upright. Across from her stood her uncle, Cyrus Wildfire, immaculate in ember-red robes and polished silver cuffs, as if this were a feast and not an accusation hearing. He laid items on a stone table one by one with ritual precision: her healer ledger, 3 vials of tonic, a lancet wrapped in bloodied cloth. Gasps moved through the crowd in rough waves. Celeste stared at the lancet and knew, with the clean, cold certainty of betrayal, that she had never seen it before tonight. "Read the entries," Elder Marrow commanded. Cyrus bowed his head with counterfeit grief and opened the ledger to a page she had written 6 nights ago, then turned to a second page she had not. Ink, copied in her hand too perfectly, listed Moonbane in increasing doses under the Luna's care schedule. The forgery was excellent and wrong in ways only a healer would notice. The strokes were too even. The herb abbreviations were old-school forms no one under 50 used anymore. She tried to speak and coughed instead. "That is not my entry," Celeste said when her breath returned. "Moonbane is restricted. I never prescribed it. Check the root stores, check the grind bowls in lower dispensary, and you'll find yarrow residue, not—" "Enough," Cyrus cut in, not raising his voice. The softness was worse than a shout. "You had charge of the Luna's chamber. You were alone with her at second bell. Then she miscarried." The word hit like a stone. Miscarried. Not lost. Not mourned. Weaponized. In the benches behind him, pack members who had once brought Celeste their children's fevers and their elders' pain looked away from her face. A few met her gaze with hard satisfaction, as though a long-awaited ugliness had finally surfaced. She recognized too many of them. Baker Arlen, whose son she had pulled through winter lung fever. Toma from the tannery, whose mate's hand she had reset after a fall. Their silence scraped deeper than the council's fury. Elder Marrow rose, Moonbone's staff tapping twice for order. Under covenant law, a healer accused of bloodline sabotage may request a full evidence audit or submit to immediate bond judgment. Celeste tasted ash. "I request the audit." Cyrus smiled without showing teeth. "Denied by emergency decree. The Luna's womb was attacked. Our succession has been struck. We cannot indulge delay while traitors hide behind procedure." Murmurs sharpened into agreement. 2 minor elders kept their eyes fixed on the floor. Blackmail, Celeste thought, though she had no proof that would survive this room. Marrow lifted his hand again. "Then we proceed with public bond rejection right. Bring forth the pledged mail." Brennan Holt stepped from the side aisle, broad-shouldered, familiar, and pale around the mouth. He had been promised to Celeste since their apprenticeship years, not from love, but from practicality. Healer lineage tied to a steady hunter line. They had shared winter shifts, stitched wounds back to back, argued over fever protocols and laughed once, maybe twice, like people who might grow into something gentler. She had never asked if he wanted the bond. Tonight, she saw the answer. "Brennan," she said, quiet enough that only he and the nearest elders heard. "Look at me. You know I didn't do this." He looked, his jaw flexed. Then he turned toward the moon emblem carved into the floor and spoke the rejection words in a clear, carrying voice. "I break pledge and bond. I cast Celeste Ravencrest outside my protection, my name, and my future. Let her stand unclaimed before moon and pack." The hall erupted. Some voices cheered. Others shouted for exile branding. Someone yelled traitor healer. Someone else called for pyre law, old and ugly and illegal for 3 generations. Celeste's pulse thundered so hard her vision narrowed to points of light. Present tense invaded her skull in jagged fragments. I am still kneeling. I am still breathing. If I stand, they will call it defiance. If I stay, they will call it guilt. No one is listening. No one is listening. Elder Marrow raised the branding iron from the brazier. By tribunal authority. Invalid. The single word split the noise. It came from the back ranks, low and resonant, threaded with command older than the hall itself. Heads turned. A man stepped forward through the press of bodies, and the crowd opened without realizing it was yielding. He was taller than most wolves in human skin, wrapped in dark travel leathers dusted with road grit, left cheek crossed by a pale scar that cut into his beard line. His gaze, when it found the dais, held the molten gold gleam of a predator at full wakefulness. Not wild, controlled. More dangerous for it. Cyrus's expression faltered for the first time. State your name and rank before you interrupt council law. The stranger did not look at him. King law outranks council law when a bond right is corrupted. He moved to Celeste's side and extended his hand, palm up, asking rather than taking. Ancient Clause 13, Right Integrity. A rejection cannot stand if spoken over a false mate, while the true bond remains unsummoned. Elder Marrow went gray. That clause has not been invoked in decades. Neglect does not erase it. His attention shifted to Celeste at last, and the force in his face eased into something almost careful. Celeste Ravencrest, if you consent, rise. Her fingers trembled as she put her hand in his. The instant his skin closed over her pulse point, heat shot up her arm and detonated behind her ribs. Scents vanished from the hall in one sweeping rush, replaced by storm rain, cedar bark, iron on whetstone. Awareness prickled along her spine so sharply she sucked in a breath. The animal instinct she had buried under duty and discipline went rigid, alert, stunned. Gold sigils kindled beneath old scar lines along the stranger's forearm, faint at first, then bright enough for those nearest to flinch back. His posture locked, as if he was holding against 2 opposite forces tearing through him: hunger and restraint, claim and refusal. Instead of looming over her, he dropped to one knee on the tribunal stone, head bowed. Your right was interrupted, he said, voice roughened by effort. I will not finish it without permission. Do you allow me to continue? The hall had gone silent enough to hear braziers hiss. Rumors rose in Celeste's memory all at once. War Ghost King, scarred sovereign. Alistair Stoneheart, vanished after border campaigns, refusing coronation, refusing court, refusing fate. Prophecy fragments whispered through infirmary corridors when people thought healers did not listen. The king's mate would crown him or kill him. If this was him, touching his hand might have just pulled a blade across both their throats. Yet kneeling there, he waited. She heard her own voice, thin but steady. Yes. For one heartbeat, a narrow arc of silver light stretched between their chests, delicate as a drawn thread and bright as a struck star. Gasps rippled through the benches. Alistair rose and turned to the dais, still holding Celeste's hand like an oath. By witnessed bond and king law authority, I complete the interrupted vow. I take this woman under my protection against false judgment, coercion, and unlawful harm. Any challenge to her now is a challenge to the crown. Cyrus recovered first, fury tightening every line in his face. You have no crown. You abandon the throne. Alistair's expression did not change. Then this is your first lesson in my return. The tribunal dissolved into shouting. Elders argued over precedent. Sentinels shifted loyalties mid-breath, some stepping back from Celeste, others surging toward her as if to seize her anyway. By the time the third bell sounded from the western tower, the hall had become a legal battlefield, one accusation away from physical violence. Alistair leaned close enough for only Celeste to hear. "Can you walk?" She swallowed, dizzy with bond scent and terror. "If I have to?" "You do." His grip tightened once, reassuring rather than possessive. "Stay at my left. Do not answer anyone but me." A line of King Guard emerged from the side doors at his signal, men and women in old Stoneheart colors that should not have still existed, forming a moving shield around them. Cyrus shouted for detention under tribunal authority. Marrow shouted back that King Challenge suspended tribunal power until adjudication. Brennan stood frozen where he had spoken rejection, staring at the silver thread's vanished afterimage like a man who had stepped off a cliff and only then looked down. Celeste moved because stopping meant hands on her again. She moved through a corridor of faces twisted by disbelief, resentment, and hungry curiosity. At the threshold, she glanced back once and caught Cyrus watching her with a look so measured it chilled her more than his anger had. Not rage, calculation. The night outside bit cold against sweat-soaked skin. Wind carried pine pitch, wet stone, distant kennel musk, and the copper trace from her own cracked knuckles. The guard detail angled toward the infirmary wing rather than the guest keep, and Celeste understood the implication. Protected custody, not freedom. Relief and humiliation collided in her throat. As they crossed the lower courtyard, alarm horns began to sound from the east gate, short bursts signaling internal dispute, not foreign attack. Pack life continued at the edges of catastrophe. Kitchen smoke lifted from service chimneys. A stable hand hauled water buckets and kept his head down. Somewhere, a child laughed, quickly shushed by an adult who knew the night was not safe for joy. At the infirmary annex door, Alistair paused and faced her fully for the first time away from the crowd. In torchlight, his scars looked older, deeper, mapped over with the fading shimmer of runes now hidden beneath skin. The golden intensity in his eyes remained, but he kept his distance, as if honoring the same boundary he had asked for in the hall. "They will come for you at dawn under some pretext," he said. "Confession rite, containment order, whatever word makes cruelty sound lawful." Celeste's shoulders tightened. "Then I should run now." A brief, unexpected curve touched one corner of his mouth, gone almost immediately. "Through 3 rings of hunters who know these woods better than roads? That would be dramatic. Also very short." Despite everything, a frayed laugh escaped her, half hysteria, half shock at being offered even that thin thread of levity. It broke as quickly as it came. Alistair sobered. "Do not flee blind. Survive first. Then choose." He opened the infirmary door and gestured her inside while guards took position, steel and silence sealing the threshold behind them. Celeste stepped over the worn stone sill and felt the full weight of the night settle, not as ending, but as the narrow breath between accusation and war. The annex swallowed sound the way deep snow swallowed footprints, not by force, but by quiet accumulation. Shelves of dried bark and bundled leaves lined the corridor, and a single lamp burned low beside a locked medicine chest. Celeste made it 3 steps before her knees loosened. She caught the edge of a table with both hands, breath dragging at her ribs, vision flickering. A woman in gray healer robes moved from the far doorway, silver braids pinned tight at her nape. She looked from Celeste's stained sleeves to Alistair's face, read the room in one sharp glance, and bowed. "Rooms are secured, my king. North cell is clean. Hot water is coming." "Thank you, Matron Ilya," Alistair said. "No sedatives unless I request them. No one touches her records." Ilya's gaze settled on Celeste again, gentler this time. "You are safe in this wing." "Safe." The word felt too large for the space it was asked to fill. Two Stoneheart guards stood at the corridor turn, cloaks damp from night fog, old wolf and crown insignia stitched in dull silver over black leather. They did not leer, did not whisper, did not look away in performative disgust the way tribunal watchers had. They watched doors, windows, lines of approach. Their discipline was unnerving in its own way. This was not mercy. This was structure. Alistair guided her to the north room, still holding her left hand loosely, giving her room to pull free. Iron bars crossed the small window, confirming what she had sensed in the courtyard. Protected custody. A narrow bed, a washstand, a chair. Clean bandages folded with military precision. She had worked in dozens of infirmaries and knew exactly how to read this one. Temporary refuge built for siege logic. When the door shut, the noise of the hall at last fell away from her skull. In its place came tremors she could not hide. Her fingers would not unclench from the table edge. Alistair took one step closer and stopped. "May I approach?" She stared at him, too tired for pride. "You already outrank every lock in this building." "That is not what I asked." The answer landed in her chest with disorienting force. She nodded once. He crossed to the washstand, poured warm water into a shallow basin, and knelt in front of her instead of taking the chair. Kings did not kneel. Men accustomed to command almost never did it twice in one night. He unwrapped a clean cloth, then looked up. "May I take your right hand?" She gave it to him because his voice made refusal feel like choice, not rebellion. Water darkened as he wiped ash and dried blood from her palm, careful around split skin near her thumb. Every small contact carried that same bright pull from the tribunal floor, a current under flesh that was less shock now and more relentless awareness. Storm, cedar, iron, him. Her pulse tripped each time his thumb brushed her wrist, his pupils narrowed. Amber bled into his irises, the predator surfacing for a heartbeat before restraint dragged it back. He inhaled sharply through his nose and set the cloth down with visible care, as if he had just caught himself at the edge of a cliff. Celeste could not look away. I am exhausted and cornered, and still my body knows him. I know the shape of his breath before it leaves him. I know the precise distance where his presence starts to steady me instead of frighten me. This is dangerous. This is how women become symbols while men bargain over their names. If I lean into this bond, I hand strangers a weapon and call it fate. If I resist, I tear at something my bones already recognize. I do not want to belong to a prophecy. I do not want to belong to a throne. I want one clear fact that no council can rewrite. I did not poison my Luna. I did not betray my oath. I am still myself, even with this fire under my skin. Alistair waited through the silence as if he could hear the argument inside her. Then he resumed cleaning her hand. "You asked in the hall if you should run," he said quietly. "I did for years, not from war, from this." He touched the scar across his forearm where fading runes slept beneath skin. "Prophecy was delivered to me at 19 by a council that wanted a weapon more than a ruler. The fragment they keep repeating says my mate's bloodline will either crown me or kill me. They never quote the rest." Celeste's throat tightened. There is more. There is always more when powerful men choose which lines survive. His mouth flattened. The full version names choice twice. Not doom. Choice. He finished with her right hand and reached for the left, waiting for her nod before touching her again. "I refused coronation because I would not drag an unknown woman into a sentence written by frightened elders. I built these guard lines, kept to border campaigns, and told myself absence was protection." A bitter edge entered his voice. Tonight proved absence only fed people like Cyrus. Celeste flinched at her uncle's name, and Alistair's grip eased at once, not possessive, only steady. He dried her hands, wrapped 2 fingers that had split at the knuckles, then stood and crossed to the weapons rack beside the door. He unhooked a ceremonial blade with a dark horn hilt, unsheathed it, and held it out to her handle first. The room went very still. "If you feel coerced," he said, "take this and order me out. If words fail you, point and I will go. If you decide in an hour that this bond is a chain, I break my claim in front of every elder at sunrise. No flourish. No demand for gratitude. Terms." Celeste accepted the blade on instinct. It was heavier than healer knives, balanced for close combat, edge newly honed. She lifted it and rested the point against the center of his chest, just enough to crease his shirt. He did not move. The runes along his arm glimmered once, then quieted. "Why would a king hand me this?" she asked. "Because kings are most dangerous when no one can refuse them." For a fragile, almost absurd second, a broken laugh rose in her throat at the austerity of his answer. It came out as a shaky breath instead. She lowered the blade and offered it back. He sheathed it without triumph. By the time fourth bell faded from the western tower, her hands had stopped shaking. Ilya returned with broth and a packet of willow bark, inspected Celeste's shoulder bruising, then bowed herself out when Alistair requested privacy again. He took the chair at last, back to the wall, gaze fixed on the door in the posture of someone who had slept in war camps too long to trust hinges. Celeste sat on the bed edge, blanket gathered around her knees. "Your people obey fast." "They are not my people yet," he said. "Not until the challenge is settled in law and blood." "You sound certain it will be blood." "I sound experienced." Silence gathered, dense but not hostile. Outside, boots passed the corridor in regular intervals, guard rotations, territory made visible through rhythm. When the first line of gray dawn touched the barred window, 3 hard knocks struck the annex door. Then more. Fists, not courtesy. A guard voice called, strained with contained anger. "Tribunal hunters at outer gate. They carry writs." Alistair rose in one fluid motion. "Stay behind me." Celeste stood anyway, bladeless but no longer folded. They reached the corridor as the outer doors opened to a wedge of pre-dawn cold and 6 hunters in council colors. Their leader, Garin Vale, held a scroll tube stamped with Marrow's seal. "By Tribunal Emergency Authority," Garin announced, loud enough for witnesses in the hall. "Celeste Ravencrest is ordered to confession pyre examination at once." The words hit like old poison wearing legal perfume. Alistair stepped in front of Celeste and let his control thin just enough for warning to show. His shoulders broadened, nails lengthened to darkened points. Amber burned through his gaze with an ancient predatory steadiness that made 2 hunters shift back, despite themselves. Behind him, a vast wolf shadow rose along the corridor wall, not fully formed, more presence than body, but unmistakable. "Read the writ fully," he said. Garin swallowed and unrolled the parchment. "Refusal constitutes admission of bloodline sabotage and authorizes forceful transfer." "Denied." Alistair's voice carried to every doorway. "Sovereign challenge is active. She stands under king protection. Forceful transfer now is an assault on the crown." Garin lifted his chin. "You are uncrowned." "I am uncontested in this corridor." Alistair took one measured step forward. "If you claim lawful evidence, present it now. Not forged ledgers, not panic decrees. Evidence that survives witness examination." The hunters hesitated. Stoneheart guards formed a half circle, weapons sheathed but hands ready. No one lunged, no one bared teeth. The tension was a held blade, edge hovering. Celeste looked at Garin, then at the scroll in his hand, and recognized a notation mark in the margin, tiny and angled. The same old-school script form that had betrayed the forged ledger. Cyrus's influence, again, hidden in plain sight. She moved to Alistair's left shoulder where he had told her to stay, and this time it felt less like obedience and more like position. "Your writ is contaminated," she said, voice carrying farther than she expected. "Margin Hand uses pre-reform tribunal shorthand no current clerk is trained in. Ask your own recorder to verify." Garen's jaw worked. He did not deny it. Alistair turned his head just enough to meet her eyes. The corridor, the hunters, the guards, all of it narrowed to that lock of gaze between them, his fierce, hers unsteady, but no longer fleeing. Recognition was no longer a lightning strike, it was a line being drawn, deliberate and witnessed. "Thank you," he said, and the words were for more than the writ. Garen rolled the parchment with visible frustration. "This is not finished." "No," Alistair replied. "Now it begins lawfully." The hunters withdrew in rigid formation, taking their threat with them for the moment. When the outer doors shut, dawn finally spilled over the window bars and laid pale light across the corridor stones, touching Celeste's bandaged hands and the fading runes under Alistair's skin, as if marking both for what came next. The corridor stayed rigid for several breaths after the doors shut, as if everyone expected Garen Vale to return with twice the force and half the patience. Alistair did not move until the last echo of bootsteps faded beyond the annex wall. Then the wolf shadow behind him thinned and dissolved, and the sharpened lines of his body eased back into human shape by degrees, rather than all at once, like a drawn bow being lowered with care. Celeste realized she was still bracing for impact that had not come. Her shoulders ached from it. Alistair turned toward her slowly, keeping his hands visible and empty. "You are shaking. I noticed." Her voice came out drier than she intended. "Shock can feel like anger until it drops." He glanced to Ilya, who had appeared at the corridor turn with a folded blanket and a look that pretended not to be concern. "Matron, treatment room 3, warm stones, willow tea, and privacy protocols." Ilya nodded once. At once. Celeste nearly said she did not need coddling. The protest rose from old reflex, from years of proving she could work through fever and grief and night shifts without asking for softness. But when she tried to straighten, pain flared along her right shoulder where tribunal sentinels had pinned her down. She hissed through her teeth before she could hide it. Alistair heard. Of course he heard. "May I examine the joint?" he asked. "In the treatment room, door open. Matron present if you prefer." Choice again, precise and deliberate. Not performance for the guards. His voice had gone quieter, meant only for her. Celeste nodded, and he did not touch her until she started walking. Treatment room 3 smelled of lavender steam and sun-warmed stone. A banked coal brazier clicked softly as heat rose through iron ribs, while narrow windows admitted thin bands of morning light that painted pale ladders on the floor. Ilya set down a tray, checked that the corridor guard could see inside, and withdrew to the threshold with the practical discretion of someone who had survived too many court storms to waste words. Alistair waited beside the table. "Do you want her to stay in the room?" Celeste looked from him to Ilya, then back. "At the door is fine." He inclined his head. "Sit when ready." She sat. He knelt to her eye level first, then lifted his hand and paused an inch from her sleeve. "May I?" She drew a breath and answered yes. His fingers were warm as he rolled the fabric from her shoulder, exposing skin mottled in darkening bruises. He did not wince or curse on her behalf. He simply took in the injury with focused attention, the way an experienced fighter assessed damage without dramatics. He pressed 2 points near the collarbone and waited. "Pain there?" "Yes." "There?" "Less." "Good." "Not dislocated." "Muscle strain and deep bruising." He reached for a ceramic jar, then stopped with his hand hovering over it. "This salve dulls inflammation. It also carries pine resin. The bond may amplify scent response right now. If that feels like too much, we use plain poultice." The practicality of that sentence almost undid her. The man who had challenged a tribunal for her was asking whether pine resin might overwhelm her senses. Use the plain one, she said, because honesty felt less dangerous than pretending. He gave Ilya a brief, appreciative glance, and the matron passed over a bowl of unscented paste. Alistair spread it with careful strokes, never crossing the edge of necessary touch. Every few moments he checked her face before continuing, calibrating pressure, distance, pace. She found herself watching his scars instead of his hands, the pale seam at his cheek, the old bite mark near his wrist, the runes sleeping beneath skin like embers under ash. "What happens," she asked, "if you stop restraining it?" His hand stilled. "The bond pull?" The part of you that looked at Garen like he was one heartbeat from being torn apart. A shadow moved across his expression, not shame exactly, but memory. If I stop restraining fully, I stop hearing nuance. I hear threat, territory, claim, useful in war, catastrophic in halls full of frightened people with titles. He resumed applying the poultice, and today, restraint is the only way to keep your name from becoming an excuse for slaughter. Celeste studied him, confusion and relief tangling in equal measure. Most men in power call restraint weakness. Most men in power were never taught what strength costs other people. He wrapped her shoulder with clean linen, knotting it one-handed and neat. Then, before she could speak, he stood and took 2 full steps back, putting clear space between them. The bond did not vanish. It thrummed low under her skin, insistent and alive, but his distance gave her breathing room inside it. "I am waiting for the turn. I am waiting for the demand that follows every kindness I have ever been given by someone above me. Payment arrives eventually. Silence is a debt. Gratitude is a leash. I know this pattern in my bones, yet he keeps handing me exits. He keeps naming my choice before his authority. If this is strategy, it is patient enough to feel like mercy, and that thought terrifies me more than open cruelty, because I want to trust it. I want to set down the weight for 1 hour and believe he means what he says. I am not ready. I am not unwilling. Those are different things, and maybe he understands that difference better than anyone in this territory." Alistair looked toward the window, jaw tightening as distant voices rose from the outer court. "We have maybe 1 quiet hour before the council tries another angle." Celeste flexed her fingers against the treatment table. "Then use it. Ask what you need." His gaze returned to her, unexpectedly vulnerable beneath the command. "What I need, and what I can rightfully take, are separate." He exhaled slowly. "I need certainty that when this escalates, you will tell me if my protection feels like a cage. I can take your safety under law. I cannot take your trust." The answer sat between them, heavy and clean. "I don't have certainty to give," she said. "But I can give warning. If I feel caged, you hear it first. That is enough for now." By the time the sun cleared the eastern pines, the annex had shifted from siege quiet to official traffic. Boots crossed the courtyard in clipped rhythms. Messengers arrived breathless and left paler than they had come. Somewhere below, someone argued over archive access loud enough for the words evidence chain to carry through stone. Ilya returned with tea just as a new knock struck the outer doors, this one measured and formal. A guard voice followed. "Envoy delegation from Elder Marrow, 6 present. 1 requests personal audience with Healer Celeste by prior bond claim." Celeste's stomach dropped. "Brennan." Alistair's face hardened, not with jealousy but with calculation. "Do you want him admitted?" She hated that she had to think, hated more that she wanted closure and feared manipulation in the same breath. "Yes. In corridor view. No closed room." Alistair gave a single nod. "Your conditions stand." They stepped into the annex hall where guards had formed parallel lines. Marrow's envoy waited near the entrance. A tribunal scribe, 2 hunters, a council legal aide, and Brennan Holt in formal dark wool, hands bare to show peace. He looked as if he had not slept. His gaze found Celeste, then skittered to the bandage at her shoulder, then to Alistair standing half a step behind and to her left, close enough to intervene, far enough to avoid overshadowing her. The scribe unrolled a document. Under Emergency Restoration Protocol, the Council petitions for provisional transfer of accused healer to neutral holding until full hearing. Denied, Alistair said. The legal aide bristled. You deny before review? I deny because the petition still labels her accused saboteur without evidentiary certification. His voice sharpened. Revise language or leave. Brennan swallowed and stepped forward despite the aide's warning glance. Celeste, please. This is turning into faction warfare. If you sign a limited confession, maybe negligence instead of intent, they might commute exile. You could live. Silence snapped taut. Celeste stared at him, at the man who had once handed her fresh needles during long shifts and now offered survival built on a lie. Hurt arrived, but it no longer knocked her off balance. It clarified. I did not poison the Luna, she said. I know what you said. No. You know what you chose. He flinched. I chose what kept my family from being stripped by the council. Alistair moved then, a contained force sliding into place beside her without touching. The air in the hall seemed to tighten around him. You will address her as Healer Celeste, he said to Brennan, each word cut clean. You will not solicit false confession in my protection wing. You will not trade her life for your comfort again. Brennan's chin lifted in brittle pride. You do not know what the council can do. Alistair's gaze went feral for a heartbeat, something ancient looking out through amber and restraint. I know exactly what councils can do when good men stay convenient. The hunters shifted their grips on spear shafts. Stoneheart guards mirrored them, still sheathed, still disciplined. No one crossed the line. Marrow's legal aide tried to recover ground. This tone is unnecessary, my king. This tone is measured, Alistair replied. Unmeasured would sound different. He turned to the scribe. Record this precisely. Any further approach to Healer Celeste that includes coercion, insult, or unverified charge triggers contempt sanctions under Restored King Charter. Petitioners may submit evidence at midday review in open chamber with cross-examination. Not before, not in corridors, not through emotional blackmail. The scribe hesitated, then wrote. Brennan looked at Celeste one last time, eyes wet and furious at once, as if he wanted her to absolve him for choices he still defended. She gave him nothing but the truth. You were not wrong to be afraid, she said quietly. You were wrong to make me pay for it. He bowed his head, not quite apology, and stepped back into envoy line. When they finally withdrew, the corridor breathed again in ragged increments. Ilya muttered something about weak tea and weaker men under her breath, earning a startled half-laugh from one of the younger guards, before discipline swallowed it. Alistair turned toward Celeste, scanning her face for damage he could not bandage. Are you all right? She considered the question, considered the old habit of saying yes to end concern quickly. Then she chose differently. I am angry, she said. I am still afraid, but I am standing. His expression softened with unmistakable respect. That is more than all right. She looked at his outstretched hand, offered not as command but invitation, and set her palm in his. The bond answered with a steady warmth that no longer felt like a trap snapping shut, only a door opening onto ground she had not yet learned to trust. This time, she did not let go. Her fingers remained threaded through Alistair's, and the small act changed the geometry of the corridor more effectively than any decree. Guards who had watched her as a protected liability now watched her as a principal in the conflict. Celeste felt the shift in their attention, in the way shoulders squared and gazes sharpened toward doors instead of toward her wounds. A runner burst in from the south stairwell, breath ragged, tribunal sash crooked across his chest. He skidded to a stop, bowed to Alistair, then looked to Celeste with the panic of a man who had rehearsed this message and forgotten half his words anyway. Elder Marrow requests immediate attendance in the records chamber. He says it concerns chain of custody for the healer ledger and tonic vials. The runner swallowed. He also says to bring healer Celeste because only she will recognize what was altered. Alistair did not release her hand. Who delivered the request to you? Council Clerk Danver. Where is Danver now? The runner hesitated. Missing from his station, my king. Ilya clicked her tongue in quiet disgust. Convenient. Celeste felt cold gather under her ribs. We go anyway, she said. If evidence is moving, every minute matters. Alistair studied her face, reading strain and resolve with equal care. Then we go with full escort and locked route. By midday, the old records chamber had become a contested border. 2 Stoneheart guards stood at the archive door, while Marrow and 3 council auditors waited inside amid towers of ledgers, wax tablets, and storage boxes tied in faded cord. Dust floated in sunbeams like pale ash. The room smelled of dried parchment, old ink, and the sour tang of fear. Marrow looked older than he had in tribunal light. Thank you for coming. You asked for urgency, Alistair said. Speak plainly. The elder gestured to a table where Celeste's ledger lay open beside 4 other healer books. Your accusation page was inserted, not written in sequence. We found cut binding fibers and a new stitch hidden in spine glue. Celeste stepped forward, forcing herself to breathe through the pounding in her ears. She traced the seam with gloved fingers, then checked page edges against the original folio marks she had learned as an apprentice. Different batch. Same age stain rubbed in after the fact. A forgery assembled by someone with access, training, and time. Who had ledger keys this week? She asked. One auditor, a narrow-faced woman named Selka, answered without looking up. Officially, archive staff only. Unofficially? Selka's mouth tightened. Council Regency Office retained override authority under emergency decree. Cyrus. The name did not need speaking. It lived in every silence. Marrow cleared his throat and lifted the tonic vials with a cloth wrap, as though touching them bare-handed might implicate him. We also tested residue from the Luna's night tonic cup, moonflower, iron root, and traces of moonbane suspended in honey syrup. Celeste's pulse hammered. Moonbane does not stay suspended in that ratio without repeated shaking. Someone dosed close to administration time. Alistair's gaze cut toward Marrow. Who served the cup? A second auditor unfolded a witness slip. Attending server Mira says she prepared the tray. Then Counselor Cyrus intercepted it in corridor, said he would deliver personally because the Luna requested family privacy. Marrow closed his eyes briefly, as if the admission cost him more than authority could cover. Mira was afraid to report it. She believed she would be charged as accessory. Afraid of whom? Alistair asked. Exactly? No one answered quickly. Finally, Selka whispered, of the men collecting debts for regent pledges. The crux of it surfaced with ugly clarity. This had never been one falsified page. Cyrus had built a system of pressure around grief, law, and hunger, then placed Celeste at the center as the easiest body to burn. He could claim he defended succession while manufacturing succession crisis. He could paint himself as necessary. Marrow reached beneath the table and produced a sealed packet. There is more, anonymous statements from minor elders. They describe coercion, threats to land grants, promises of debt forgiveness if they voted emergency powers through. I did not believe all of it at first. Alistair's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. You believed enough to proceed with branding. Marrow bowed his head. Yes. The word lingered like smoke. Celeste pressed her hand flat to the ledger to steady herself. Where is the Luna now? In recovery apartments with 2 sworn guards, Marrow said. Sedated for pain, conscious in intervals. Celeste met Alistair's eyes. If Cyrus knows this is exposed, she becomes leverage. I know. He turned to the nearest guard. Double protection on Luna quarters. No one enters without my sign or Healer Celeste's confirmation. Not council seal. Not elder rank. Mine. As the guard moved, another figure slipped through the archive doorway. Garen Vale, jaw clenched, rain-damp cloak over council leathers. He carried a leather satchel and looked like a man deciding whether truth was worth his career. I have field notes from last night's Pyre team, Garen said. Unofficial copies. If I submit through tribunal channels, they vanish. Alistair gestured to the table. Then they stay here. Garen emptied the satchel. Inside were route maps, pyre logs, and a requisition slip authorizing wildfire resin in quantities far beyond ritual need. Signature block, Cyrus Wildfire, Temporary Regency Office. Destination, Old Moon Circle Storage Vault. Celeste stared at the line item, mind racing through herb chemistry and wardcraft she had studied to prevent ritual fires from spreading. Wildfire resin could become a sealing barrier if inscribed correctly. If keyed by blood, it could turn sacred ground into a trap. Why order this now? She whispered. Garen answered, voice raw. Because he's preparing a stage. The words landed just as the bond between her and Alistair tightened in a sudden, shared alertness. Not pain, recognition. The same instinctive signal that had flared before Garen's first dawn approach, now stronger and edged with urgency. I am tired of rooms where men apologize over documents while danger keeps moving. I am tired of being asked to trust process when process was turned against me in a single night. Yet this is different from helplessness. I can read these marks. I can name these compounds. I can see the architecture of what Cyrus built because he used my profession as cover. Fear is here, heavy and familiar, but it no longer arrives alone. Beside it stands anger with direction. Beside that, an unbearable tenderness for the scarred king watching every door before he watches me, as if my breath matters as much as his crown. I do not know what to call this bond without shrinking it into myth. I only know it asks for courage in increments, and I keep choosing the next one. Alistair leaned closer, speaking low for her alone. What are you calculating? Wildfire wards need an ignition anchor and a blood key. If he uses Ravencrest blood, he can bar entry to everyone except me or my direct line. She swallowed. He could force me to walk into a ritual ground and call it lawful surrender. His jaw hardened. Then we prevent the ritual. Before he could issue orders, the archive door slammed open hard enough to rattle hinges. A Luna attendant stumbled in, apron torn, face streaked with tears and soot. They took her, she gasped. Smoke in the recovery hall, red smoke. We could not breathe, and when it cleared, she was gone. Guards alive, but down. They left this. She held out a narrow bronze cylinder engraved with wildfire crest. Marrow recoiled as though it might burn him. Alistair took it with a cloth wrap, checked for needle traps, then unsealed the cap. A folded vellum strip slid free. He read once, expression turning to carved stone, then handed it to Celeste. The script was Cyrus's immaculate hand. Bring the marked healer to the old moon circle at moonrise. Come unarmed and kneel where traitors kneel. In exchange, the Luna breathes, and the child line remains unbroken by further loss. If the scarred king claims authority, let him prove it by abdication before witnesses. If he refuses, I light the circle and history names your healer what she is. Do not test the wards. They are keyed to Ravencrest blood. Below the message, pressed into drying wax, was a smear of dark red thumbprint. The room erupted in overlapping voices. Marrow demanded immediate assault. Selka argued for negotiation. Garen swore under his breath that moon circle approaches were already closing. Alistair did not raise his voice, yet silence returned, because command radiated from him like drawn steel. "Status report," he said. A captain at the door answered. "Scouts confirm movement toward Old Circle. 8 to 12 loyalists with wildfire insignia concealed under ritual cloaks. Perimeter stones are igniting in segments. Any non-Ravencrest crossing line 1 triggers flareback." Celeste's skin went cold. Flareback to what intensity? Enough to drop a warrior. Alistair looked at her, then away, as if measuring all possible futures and rejecting each one in turn. No one goes alone. Cyrus had designed precisely for that response. Celeste saw it unfold. Force the king into public claim. Force a confrontation at sacred ground. Weaponize prophecy fragments. Frame any rescue as usurpation. If Alistair stormed the circle, council loyalists could call civil rupture. If he waited, the Luna remained hostage. If Celeste went without plan, Cyrus controlled the ritual and the narrative. She moved to the table and spread Garen's map beside the resin requisition. "There may be one way through without setting off full ward burn." Every head turned. She pointed to a drainage cut behind the western altar stones. "Old circles have runoff channels for sacrificial washwater. Most ward lines are laid for surface approach. If resin was poured fast, channel seals will be thin." Her finger traced a narrow path. "I can test with diluted blood marker and neutralizing ash. If it holds, 2 people pass. No more." Alistair's answer came instantly. "Then I go with you." "No." The refusal surprised even her with its force. "You are exactly what he wants visible on that stone before witnesses. If you cross first, he gets his succession war." He stepped toward her, eyes blazing with fear sharpened into control. "He has the Luna. He has threatened you by name. I will not send you into a warded kill ground with a map and hope. And I will not let him script this as king against council while the truth stays buried." Her voice shook once, then steadied. "I am the only one who can read his blood key from inside the line. That is not martyrdom. That is math." For a heartbeat they stood on opposite edges of the same terror, bond humming like a taut wire between them. Then Alistair exhaled through his teeth and nodded once, abrupt and pained. "Then we make your math survivable." He turned to the captain. "Assemble breach team at West Ridge. No banners, no war horns. We move before moonrise and hold outside flare line until signal." Marrow stared. "Signal?" Celeste folded Cyrus's message and slid it into her pocket. "If the wards drop, you will see silver fire over the altar." Garen looked stricken. "That could kill you." "It could," she said. "So could letting him keep the stage." A bell began tolling from the upper watchtower, slow and heavy, calling rank leaders to emergency assembly. Outside the archive windows, clouds thickened over the pines, turning afternoon light the color of old pewter. The day had narrowed to a blade edge. Alistair reached for her hand again, not to restrain, simply to anchor. She met him halfway. When the second toll sounded, a scout skidded into the doorway with mud to his knees and panic in his eyes. "My king, Wildfire just sent another message to the outer gate." The scout thrust forward a torn strip of cloth, Luna-white linen marked with fresh ash. Moonrise moved forward, written in charcoal across the fabric. "Come at dusk, or she burns first." Critical had arrived sooner than any of them planned. Alistair read the charcoal scrawl on the linen strip, then passed it to Celeste without taking his eyes off the scout. "How long ago?" "Moments, my king. Gatewatch says the runner came from North Ravine, masked, then vanished into the brush." Cyrus was collapsing the timetable on purpose, forcing panic into every decision point. Celeste folded the cloth once and tucked it beside his first message in her pocket. "He wants us rushed and angry. We give him neither." Marrow stepped forward, voice frayed. "Dusk is less than 2 hours. If we delay for ceremony law, he can kill her. We are not delaying, Celeste said. We are choosing sequence. She turned to Alistair. I need my lower dispensary lockbox, the antidote batch from miscarriage night, and the blood response memory stone from cold storage. His stare held hers, fierce and unwilling. You are not crossing that ward line alone. I am crossing first, not alone in purpose. Her breath shook once, then steadied. If you breach by force, he gets his prophecy theater. If I enter as healer and trigger diagnostic proof in front of witnesses, he loses the room he built. Garen swore softly. You are talking about activating Ravencrest diagnostic magic from an altar keyed by enemy resin that can burn straight through your strength. Celeste met his gaze. Then I do it quickly. They moved fast, not chaotic. Marrow dispatching witness summons to every major pack house, Selka securing forged ledgers and vial evidence in sealed satchels, Ilya pressing pain salve and clean wraps into Celeste's hands without argument. Alistair shadowed her through the annex vaults while she retrieved the narrow green vial she had brewed that night and the dark oval memory stone suspended in preserving brine. The stone warmed when her fingers closed around it, Luna blood recognition flickering silver across its surface. I am walking toward the man who rewrote my life in one night, and I am carrying proof in a healer's kit instead of steel. Fear keeps trying to narrow me into prey, into the girl kneeling on tribunal stone while others decide what her body means. Not tonight. I know compounds, dilution curves, tissue responses, blood resonance under moonlight. I know how lies look when they are forced to meet chemistry in public. I am not stepping into that circle to be brave in some abstract story. I am stepping in because facts can still be made visible if someone is willing to bleed for them, and because the king beside me has offered power without erasing me. I choose this. I choose it with open eyes. By the time dusk bled copper along the pine tops, the old moon circle looked less like sacred ground and more like a trap dressed in ritual clothing. Wildfire resin burned in low red veins between standing stones, throwing off heat without flame. The perimeter shimmered in waves that made distance hard to judge. Beyond the line, Stoneheart guards and council witnesses packed the ridge under strict order, banners lowered, weapons sheathed unless called. Alistair stood at the front, shoulders tight as drawn cable. Inside the circle, the Luna was bound upright against the western pillar, soot on her cheeks, breathing shallow but steady. Cyrus waited at the central altar in regent crimson over ceremonial black. Execution blade bare in one hand, the other marked with fresh cuts where he had keyed the wards. His smile when he saw Celeste was warm enough to pass for familial in poor light. There she is, he called, voice carrying across stone. My gifted niece. Come kneel where traitors kneel, and perhaps I return what your incompetence already stole. Alistair's answer cracked like a strike of iron. Release the Luna and stand down. Attempted regicide and hostage-taking are capital charges. Cyrus laughed. Spoken like a man desperate to sound crowned. Step across then. Oh, right. You cannot. He angled the blade toward Celeste. Only Ravencrest blood passes cleanly. Your king can watch while law is corrected. A young guard on the ridge ignored orders and lunged toward the line. The ward flared red-white and threw him back hard onto the gravel, conscious but gasping. The crowd recoiled. Chaos shivered at the edge of breaking. Celeste lifted her voice before panic could crest. No one crosses. He wants casualties. She handed Alistair her satchel strap for one breath, then reclaimed it. If I fall, you burn the resin channels from west drainage. Not center. West. His jaw flexed. You are asking me to wait while he stands within blade reach. I am asking you to trust my craft the way I trust your command. She took one step closer, lowering her voice so only he heard. If you love me as choice, Let me choose this. Something ancient and pained moved through his expression. Then he nodded, once, as if the motion cost him blood. Signal and I am there. She crossed the line. Heat climbed her legs like living wire, then settled when her palm brushed the nearest marker stone. Ravencrest blood accepted. Behind her, the ward sealed again with a low hum. Cyrus opened his arms in mock welcome. See? Family privilege. Celeste did not approach the altar directly. She circled first, reading resin pores, noting where the lines pooled too thick near the eastern runes and too thin along the old wash channel she had predicted. Good. A way out if she could reach it. She stopped 3 paces from him and set her satchel on the stone. You dosed Moonbane in honey suspension, she said, loud enough for the ridge. You forged my ledger using pre-reform shorthand. You requisitioned wildfire resin under Pyre authority to build a blood-keyed cage. Cyrus's smile thinned. You always did mistake knowledge for power. No, I learned they multiply. She drew the antidote vial and held it up so the liquid caught last light, pale green against dusk. Then she lifted the memory stone. Murmurs rolled through the witnesses as silver motes flickered beneath its surface. Cyrus's eyes narrowed. Put that down. Celeste climbed the altar step, set stone and vial beside the carved moon sigil, and took the ceremonial knife lying there for offerings. Alistair surged forward at the ridge, stopped only by discipline and the lethal flare line. Celeste, he called, voice rough with restraint. She met his gaze and cut her own palm in one clean motion across old healer callus. Pain flashed bright. Blood welled, then streamed over the carved channels she had traced since apprenticeship days. She pressed her hand to the sigil, smeared a precise arc of blood from north point to west drainage marker, and spoke the diagnostic invocation in Ravencrest's tongue, each word anchored to breath. The altar answered. Silver fire laced through the channels, not outward in destruction, but upward in columns of light. The memory stone cracked open with a ringing tone, projecting layered images into the darkening sky. The Luna's blood markers before collapse, then after tonic administration, then the toxin sequence itself. Moonbane's signature unmistakable, where it should never have been. Celeste uncorked the antidote and let 3 drops fall into the glowing line. The projection shifted, showing neutralization response and the precise window when treatment had still been possible. Gasps became shouts. On the ridge, Selka raised the sealed ledger packet and screamed, "Matches the forged timing exactly." Cyrus moved. He lunged for the execution blade with his left hand and slashed toward the altar to sever the bloodline. Celeste pivoted and drew a tight sigil with her bleeding palm across his forearm, then another at his ankle, geometry stolen from wound binding and reinvented for war. Silver bands snapped into place, locking wrist to knee. Cyrus hit one side of the altar hard, snarling as the bindings tightened. "You little—" He tore one arm free with brute force, skin splitting at the edge of the sigil, and the stolen momentum sent his blade across Celeste's shoulder. Cloth ripped. Pain flared hot and immediate, but the cut stayed shallow. She staggered, kept her stance, and slammed her blooded hand back to stone to reinforce the bind. "Now!" she shouted. Alistair crossed the ward line as the west channel she had primed collapsed the flare. He moved like Stormbreak, one decisive strike to Cyrus's weapon arm that sent the ceremonial blade skidding across the circle, ringing against stone at Marrow's feet. Guards flooded to the perimeter but held position at Alistair's barked command. Celeste's knees threatened to fold. She stayed upright by will and altar edge. "Truth bond trial," she said, voice raw. "Here, in witness of moon and pack, he grips the memory stone." Cyrus spat at her feet. "You have no authority." "I have evidence and blood right. Grip it." Alistair pinned Cyrus's free arm behind his back and forced his hand onto the fractured stone. Silver light flared up Cyrus's wrist, then into his throat. His next breath came out in his own voice, and an echoed overlay, amplified across the circle by the activated altar. I dosed the Luna myself. The crowd went silent. I altered the ledger. I planted the lancet. I paid elders in debt relief and threatened land seizure if they refused emergency powers. His face contorted as he fought the bond and lost. Words kept coming, each one dragged into the open. I needed the healer removed before Stoneheart returned. I needed the king provoked into public claim so prophecy could be finished with my hand. Ceremonial blade, moon witness, lawful chaos. Marrow sank to one knee as if struck. Garen stared at Cyrus with naked revulsion. Brennan, visible now near the second rank, covered his mouth and looked away. Cyrus's gaze found Celeste through the light, hatred and admiration twisted together. I made you small, so I could be king. Blood ran warm down Celeste's sleeve. She lifted her chin. You made me visible. Alistair's voice carried over the circle, formal and final. Cyrus Wildfire, by witnessed confession, attempted regicide, murder, forgery, and hostage-taking. I strip name, rank, and claim. Sentence is death in sanctioned combat. Cyrus laughed once, wild and broken, then shifted. Bone and muscle rolled beneath skin, fur burst dark along his spine. He tore half free of Alistair's hold and came forward in wolf form, larger than natural, jaws wide for the king's throat. The fight lasted seconds. Alistair met him head-on, partial shift flashing through shoulders and hands, amber burning bright. He absorbed the first impact, turned with it, and drove Cyrus sideways into the altar base. Stone cracked. Cyrus sprang again. Alistair caught him at the neck and chest and brought him down with a single crushing motion that ended the struggle cleanly. The circle fell into ringing stillness. No one cheered. Even justice had a cost when it wore a familiar face. Alistair rose first and stepped back from the body, breathing hard but controlled. Celeste moved to the Luna at once, cutting restraints, checking pulse, pupils, airway. She's stable, she called, then looked to Ilya and two waiting healers at the line. Bring a litter now, West Channel is safe. As they crossed in, the last of the wildfire resin gutters dimmed to ash. The ward was dead. The stage Cyrus built had collapsed under its own confession. Alistair returned to Celeste, gaze dropping to the blood at her shoulder. His hand hovered, asking without words. She leaned into the touch when it came, brief and steady over uninjured skin. Above them, the projected toxin pattern faded from the sky, leaving only first stars over the stones and a pack full of witnesses who had seen truth arrive in silver fire. For several breaths no one moved except healers around the Luna's litter and two guards covering Cyrus's body with a dark cloak. Then sound returned in layers. Orders, sobs, the rustle of cloaks, Marrow's staff striking stone as he called formal custody on every item in the circle. Celeste heard Selka reciting inventory numbers with a shaking but precise voice. Forged ledger page in sealed wrap, original ledger spine fibers, tonic vials, planted lancet, resin requisition, Garen's copied pyre logs, both wildfire messages, and the fractured memory stone now dim in its brass dish. Nothing vanished into private hands this time. Each item was witnessed, named, and marked under 3 signatures. An hour after dusk fully fell, Ilya finished binding Celeste's shoulder at the moonlit spring below the ritual rise, where water ran clear over pale rock and carried away blood in thin red ribbons that faded almost as soon as they touched the current. Torches ringed the clearing at a respectful distance. Witnesses waited in silence. Marrow with lowered head, Garen still ash-streaked, Selka clutching the evidence register, Mira wrapped in a guard cloak, Brennan at the edge of the crowd with his hands empty and his expression stripped raw. The Luna, pale but upright, sat supported on a carved bench, refusing to be absent from the end of the night that had begun with her grief. Alistair stood opposite Celeste at the spring's edge, coat discarded, shirt torn at the collar where claws had raked, but not broken deep. Moonlight silvered the scar across his cheek and caught in his eyes until they looked less like flame and more like metal, fresh from forge heat. He did not touch her yet. "Celeste Ravencrest," he said, voice roughened by battle and restraint. "I asked once in the tribunal while the room was against you. I ask again, with no blade at your back and no law forcing either of us. Without tribunal, without prophecy, without fear, do you choose me?" The clearing held its breath. She stepped closer until their foreheads almost touched. "I choose you, Alistair Stoneheart. Not because you can protect me, because you see me and still stay." Her fingers rose to his wrist, finding the runes asleep beneath skin. "Do you choose me when I disagree with you in public? When I challenge your counsels? When healing demands patience your wolves do not have?" His mouth curved, brief and fierce. "I choose you when you set my plans on fire and hand me better ones." A few startled huffs of laughter moved through the witnesses, the first fragile break in a night of iron. I am standing in front of a king with blood on both our sleeves, and the old fear still tries to whisper that devotion is only another room with a locked door. Yet the bond under my skin feels nothing like a cage now. It feels like ground after an earthquake, shaken but still there. I can feel his worry, not as command, as care sharpened to vigilance. I can feel his pride when I hold my spine straight. I can feel the space he keeps for my no, and that space is why I can offer yes. This is what I did not think existed for women like me. Power that does not erase tenderness, tenderness that does not demand surrender of self. Alistair lifted his hand slowly, giving her every chance to turn away. When she tipped her head in answer, he slid his palm to the nape of her neck, thumb resting just below her ear. "Mine," he whispered, reverent rather than possessive, as if the word meant entrusted instead of owned. "If you still want this." "Yours," she breathed, "and you are mine." His bite came at the junction of neck and shoulder, exactly where pulse met muscle. Pain flashed bright and clean, a fierce line that made her knees soften, but almost immediately heat followed, pouring outward through her chest and down her spine in widening waves. The ache transformed as the mark sealed, not disappearing, becoming meaningful, threaded with recognition so deep it felt older than language. Gold light pulsed once through his runes, and silver answered beneath her skin, the two currents meeting and stabilizing. She heard murmurs behind them, then silence again when Alistair drew back, jaw tight with control, eyes luminous. Blood beaded in two small crescents at her shoulder. He brushed them with his thumb, expression almost shaken. "Mate," he said, the word a vow. Celeste caught his shirt front and drew him down, not waiting for ceremony to place her in equal standing because she was done waiting for anyone to grant what she could claim. She turned his head, found the mark point at his neck, and bit. His breath broke against her temple, half growl, half prayer. Warmth surged in both directions this time, a complete circuit. His years of lonely command, her years of being useful but unseen, his fear of becoming weapon, her fear of becoming scapegoat, all of it moving through the bond and settling into a steadier rhythm that felt like two heartbeats learning one cadence without losing their own. When she released him, his hands were trembling. He laughed once under his breath in disbelief, then pressed his forehead to hers again. "Yours," he whispered. "Mine," she answered. "Mate." Around them, the witnesses dropped to one knee, not in fear but acknowledgement. Marrow bowed until his staff touched stone. Garen did the same with unhidden relief. The Luna rose despite Ilya's protest, laid her palm over her own heart, and inclined her head with formal grace to both of them. Alistair wrapped Celeste in his arms carefully, mindful of her shoulder, and she let herself lean fully for the first time since the tribunal floor. The bond no longer burned wild. It settled into a constant warmth under her ribs, present as breath, calm as banked coals that would not go out. "No more kneeling alone," he murmured against her hair. She closed her eyes and held him tighter. "No more hiding from Dawn." By third bell of the night, the pack hall was full again, but its shape had changed. Cyrus's regent banners were gone. Stoneheart colors hung beside Ravencrest emblems, and every bench held witnesses from each district rather than hand-picked loyalists. Selka stood at the central table with the evidence register and read chain of custody aloud from first seizure to present lock, her voice steadying as she went. Garin submitted his copied field reports into the record and added his own sworn statement naming who had ordered the false pyre transfer. Mira testified to the intercepted tonic tray, then sat with shaking hands while Ilya brought her water and did not leave her side. Marrow rose last. "I failed my office when I let emergency fear outrank procedure. I submit my seal for review and dissolution of the current council body under restored charter." No one objected. Danver, the missing clerk, was produced by guard escort before midnight, found hiding in the grain vault with archive keys and 2 payment chits bearing wildfire sign. Under truth bond, he admitted he had supplied old shorthand templates and altered routing stamps on Cyrus's orders. His sentence, issued on the spot, was labor service and permanent removal from legal office, with restitution to every family harmed by forged decrees. Brennan requested to speak. He knelt before the dais, gaze fixed on the floor. "I rejected truth because I feared losing status. I cannot ask pardon. I ask only to serve sentence where I can do least harm." Celeste looked at him for a long moment, remembering his frozen stare in the tribunal and the way he had looked down only after he had already spoken the words that broke them. "You will not touch healer law again," she said. "You will take winter border rotation under Garen's command for 2 years. If you return with honor, you keep your name. If not, you lose rank." Brennan accepted without lifting his eyes. Then the Luna stood, one hand on Ilya's arm for balance, and faced the hall. "Healer Celeste Ravencrest restored my life with skill and courage, while under accusation I should have stopped. I restore her honor publicly and permanently." She turned toward Alistair and offered him the moon-forged circlet of rule. "Alistair Stoneheart, take the throne you have already defended, not alone." He accepted, then held out his hand to Celeste. She stepped beside him, blood-stained sleeve replaced by clean white and silver, fresh mark visible at her shoulder. He placed a second circlet, lighter but no less deliberate, on her head. "By crown and bond," he said so the farthest bench could hear. "Celeste Stoneheart, royal healer and queen consort, her judgment carries equal authority in medicine, sanctuary, and life law." The hall answered with a single unified strike of fists to chests. Before dawn, they opened the great doors and turned the lower courtyard into a claiming feast lit by braziers and moonlight. Bread passed from hand to hand. Children slept on piled cloaks near the hearth wall, while elders who had not spoken in months exchanged guarded then genuine conversation. Ilya and Selka argued amiably over infirmary shelf plans at a side table covered in charcoal sketches. Garin posted new guard rosters that rotated council and Stoneheart units together. Mira laughed once, startled by the sound of it, when the Luna asked for a second cup of broth and scolded everyone who tried to make her lie down. At first light, Celeste and Alistair walked to the Annex Hill, where builders were already clearing the old storage wing for the rebuilt infirmary. A carved sign leaned against stacked timber, still smelling of fresh sap. "Sanctuary House. Open to all packs. No rank required." Celeste ran her fingers over the lettering and felt the settled bond hum warmly as Alistair came to stand at her side. Below them, A united guard column formed for morning rounds under new command lines, and beyond, smoke rose from kitchens beginning an ordinary day in a territory that had nearly torn itself apart. Alistair laced his hand with hers, marks at both their throats catching sunrise in mirrored silver gold. Together, mated and crowned, they led their pack into the light.